Hey, this is Mitch. Welcome back to the Life Stories channel. If you like the story you're about to hear, go ahead and hit the like button. If you want to hear more stories like this, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And if you know someone who likes stories like this, send them my way here at the Life Stories channel. So back in my early 20s, I lived in East Tennessee, and I worked on a couple of different commercial poultry farms. I worked on a broiler farm, and I worked on a pullet farm. Now, before I become an internet pariah for having worked on commercial factory farms, let me say a couple things about that. First off, I was working for a guy who owned the farm, who signed a contract with a company who owned the chickens, who owned the feed, and dictated the process by which those chickens were raised. I was picking up dead chickens for $100 a week. There's not a lot of political clout there. Okay. And secondly, we eat 500 million chickens in this country every year, and they got to come from somewhere. You're not going out in your backyard and harvesting a chicken a week to feed your family. Somebody else is doing that for you. Now, while the conditions in these barns may not necessarily be ideal for the birds, and if I were a chicken, I don't think I would want to live there. From an efficiency standpoint, I'm not certain we could do it much better. And we got to feed 300 million people here somehow. Anyhow, the story today is about feeding the pullets. A pullet is a bird that will spend about 2.5 years of its life laying eggs before becoming a component in a Campbell's soup can. But before it becomes an egg layer, it has to be raised in a pullet house. The pullet house is a 40-foot wide by 400-foot long barn that contains about 25,000 hens and raises them from 4 days old to about 20 weeks old. Now, because these hens are intended to be laying hens, their sexual maturity is manipulated to ensure that they lay efficiently and lay for as long as possible. So a couple things they do to manipulate their sexual maturity is one thing is that they're light restricted. There's big blackout curtains on the pullet house to block out the light, and they're only given about 8 hours of light a day, and that is actually reduced as they come closer to maturity. And the second thing is that they're feed restricted. They're fed every other day instead of every day, and they're fed only about 2/3 of what a normal chicken would eat in any single given day. Um, and if you've ever been on a diet or fasted or had an opportunity to miss a meal or two, you might have noticed a couple of things happen to you physiologically, right? One thing is that you become more kind of attuned to your environment, a little bit more anxious, nervous, excitable, right? And the other thing is you become more energetic, right? You can't sit still. You got to be doing something. And these are your body's responses to kind of drive you to go hunt and gather, go find something to eat. It's hungry, right? And a chicken behaves much the same way. So after 2 days of not eating, a pullet house can become a very frenetic place. Um, and if you think of the feed cycle of these birds on a 48-hour clock, and hour zero being at the end of the last time the chickens ate, then from hour zero to hour 47:45 are pretty empty, right? You're not feeding the birds, so there's nothing happening, right? Hour 47:45 is where the feed process starts. Now, in the pullet house, there's 4 feed lines run the length of the house. And these feed lines have a small hopper in the middle, hold about 50 pounds of ground corn, and those are connected by an overhead auger to a big feed bin outside. And at hour 47:45, that auger kicks on and it feeds the small hoppers from the big one. Now the chickens, they can smell that feed in that auger, and they also have a Pavlovian response. You remember Pavlov was the guy who rang the bell and fed the dogs, and then rang the bell and didn't feed the dogs, and discovered the dogs salivated anyway because of conditioned response. Well, these chickens have conditioned response as well, and one of their conditioned responses is they walk toward the center of the house. So you've got 25,000 chickens that would normally occupy a 400-foot long, 40-foot wide space, now in a 50-foot long, 40-foot wide space. It's it's kind of a busy place in the middle of the barn at hour 47:45. And the chickens are pecking at each other, and they're pecking at the equipment, and they're flapping around, and some of them fly up and jump on top of the hoppers. And, 17, 18-week-old chicken will weigh 3.5, 4 pounds. And if you drop a 3.5 or 4 pound bird on a plastic hopper cover, you'll dislodge it or break it. And every once in a while that would happen. And the chicken that managed to get inside that hopper, man, that was nirvana, utopia for that chicken. I mean, he hit the lottery for about a couple of minutes. Because once the auger kicked on to start feeding the individual feed pans down the length of that 400-foot pipe, down the length of that barn, was all bad for that chicken in the hopper. But that's not what the story's about. It's about what happens when the auger kicks on. Um, so you got a barn full of 25,000 chickens all packed in this tiny space and haven't eaten in 2 days, so they're really energetic, really nervous, and very excited. And they can smell the food. The anticipation is, electric, right? And then the feed lines kick in. Now the feed lines run the full length of the barn. The hopper's in the middle of the feed line, and when the feed line kicks in, that's that's how the chicken's actually getting food. The feed line drops into the corn into pans, and the chickens eat the food out of the pans. Well, when after 2 days of not eating, being packed on top of 25,000 of your closest friends, when that feed line kicks in, it's like a bomb went off in the middle of the house. I mean, chickens running everywhere, chicken shit and feathers, and birds flying everywhere, dust so thick you can't see to the end of the house. It is quite a sight to see, to watch those birds finally get fed after 2 days. And that pile of chickens in the middle of the house disperse across the 400-foot length of the house is kind of interesting to watch. It starts in the center and kind of migrates out. And there's always one chicken, always one, that's, I don't know if he's got it figured out, or if he's just a chicken shit, or what his problem is, but there's always one chicken that leads the pack to the very end pan on the line and beats them by probably 20, 30 feet. I think he knows that if he waits at that end pan, he can be the first one at the feed. Um, so, uh, some days you're the guy at the end pan waiting for the feed, and some days you're in the middle of the pile, in the middle of the bomb, right? Let's hope that you're the guy patiently waiting in the end pan and not in the middle of the bomb. Anyhow, if you like the story, go ahead and hit the like button. If you want to hear more stories like this, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And if you know somebody who likes stories like this, go ahead and send them my way here at the Life Stories channel. Thanks for listening. Bye.